Hello, my terrific troop of talented students. I've been getting a little wild with my alliterations lately. I don't know if you ever look at the daily information pages I post where it's like the instructions for that day, but I feel like I'm getting pretty good at it. If you can hear the drum line outside my window, I'm very sorry. Love it so much, brings me joy. Love that I can hear them, but hopefully it doesn't come through and bother you guys in this here recording. I finally got Screencastify to work so I could video this and chat through it with you guys. I don't know. I would imagine that my fidgetiness might bother some people in the lecture, so I thought this was a good option to have both the A+ College Ready one and one where I'm going through and talking about everything as well. So you kind of have a couple of options depending on what sort of lecture style you might prefer. Or both, there probably will be information in one that isn't in the other, and vice versa. So, populations. That's what's happening. I'm going to put myself down there. All right, so obviously we have a lot of different levels of complexity that nature exists within. It kind of works within. You start out with an individual. I'm an individual. Archer's an individual. Archer's my dog, if you haven't caught on to that yet. That's the unit of natural selection, right? So one individual. A population is going to be multiples of that same species, that same individual. Communities, you've got interactions among different species. You see our little bunny friends over here interacting with, I'm going to guess that's a coyote. Within the ecosystem, you start getting flows of energy and matter, like those biogeochemical cycles that we've talked about previously. And then in the biosphere as a whole, you've got things like atmospheric conditions. You've got, other global processes that are affected as well. So this ugly guy is a California condor. Love it for the alliteration. Factors that are going to regulate population abundance and distribution. So abundance and distribution. Abundance is obviously like if I have an abundance of peanut M&Ms, I don't. I wish I did. If I have an abundance of peanut M&Ms, I have a ton of peanut M&Ms. I have a lot of them. So how common they are. And then distribution, if I distribute peanut M&Ms throughout the class, then they're spread out more evenly. So what are the things that regulate, that kind of affect that population abundance and distribution? The California condor was almost extinct. I've got my notes here too. Hopefully y'all have these pulled up with you. Unit 3 notes. We're moving through. We're on the bottom of page 3. So as of the 1980s, almost all of these birds in the wild were gone. There were only 22 left. The remaining birds that were out there, I guess those 22, were captured and then bred in captivity. So then by the time 2009 rolled around, there were 348 birds total in the wild. But apparently the main threat to these guys is lead poisoning, specifically from lead that's used in ammunition. And so what's generally happening in that situation is that the lead starts out in one part of the ecosystem and it works its way up and it magnifies as it moves up. So if the condor is eating something, obviously they eat carcasses. They are scavengers and decomposers. So as they're eating something that's already dead, if that something that they're eating had eaten animals that were exposed to the lead, then that magnifies throughout the food chain. So populations constantly change. If the input is bigger than the output, then obviously the population is going to grow. If the output exceeds the input, then the population will eventually go extinct, which is not great. Population size as a whole can be calculated by subtracting outputs from the population, deaths, and immigration. Immigration with an E. So something to keep in mind here is that we'll be talking about two different types of immigration and emigration, I suppose, from inputs to the population, which are births, and immigration. So when I said math this time, it's not anything too scary, right? Nothing too bad. So again, factors that might regulate. We've got a couple of different things here. You got population density and population distribution. I would argue that this might be one of the hardest units when it comes to vocabulary. I'm going to put myself in that forest. This might be one of the hardest units when it comes to vocabulary, just because almost all the definitions have the word population in them. And I feel like that can make it a bit confusing sometimes, obviously. So if you look at page 4 of your student notes, you kind of got a breakdown of all of these. Hopefully you can see that. You got a breakdown of all of those. I definitely recommend, if you don't look at the notes, the student notes for anything else, look at it for page 4 so that you can go through and see all of these different population definitions. So I think that will be useful to you. So population density are just number of individuals per unit area or volume, depending on where they are at a given time. So the amount of individuals per unit area, like 10 coyotes per square mile, right? Population density. Population distribution is how they're distributed with respect to one another. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, we've got this graphic. Random distribution is something that you're going to see pretty commonly in plant species. Uniform distribution, this is pretty satisfying. Their lines could be better, these birds, but pretty darn satisfying. They're spaced out almost perfectly. If I remember correctly, aquatic birds like this tend to make their nests literally like just out of like neck's reach from the bird next to them, so that the bird next to them can't reach over and like mess with them or anything. Pretty cool. So that one's pretty uniform. Oh my. And then you've got this one down here, which I think says clumped. I want to make sure I'm not wrong. Clumps. Yes, I can't see because of the stop sharing button, but I thought that said clumped distribution, and that makes sense because like in these meerkats or prairie dogs, what's the difference? These look like meerkats. You've got little clumps, little groups. You got a couple of lone wolves out here, but for the most part, they're in little groups where they stay together, and it is safer. It says it provides extra protection for them. Oh my. Goodness gracious. Okay, so most populations tend to live together in either clumps or patches, and that makes sense, right? Because the species are going to tend to stay where the resources are, right? Anytime you watch like Discovery Channel or Animal Planet or whatever, do people still watch that? I hope so. That's all I watched growing up. Anytime you're watching TV that has animals in it, normally you're going to see them around important resources. So around a watering hole, near a river, things like that. Biodiversity is always higher near water, so organisms and species they're clustering in that area. Also, if you're in a group with all of your species pals, you're going to have a better chance of finding those resources because you're spread out. You're all kind of looking for those resources together, as opposed to one organism wandering around by themselves. In some cases, this protects some animals from predators. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely look up a video. Just type in something along the lines of elephant herd protecting calf. Maybe elephants are called calves. Because they do that. Like that's why they're in a herd, right? The big adult elephants will surround the baby in a circle and protect it from whatever predator is trying to get at it. And then in some cases, if they are predators, packs allow some to get prey more easily. So things like lions travel in a pride, right? And that allows for them to have better hunting statistics, basically, because 2 lions can take down a zebra a lot easier than 1 lion can, right? Even though it's only the lady lions that do that. Male lions don't really do much. Cool. So, moving right along. Generalized dispersion patterns for plants. I know there's nothing more exciting that you wanted to talk about today than that. But in this case, it's generally just the difference between how things are dispersed. Just a fancy word for how they're organized, how they're placed. When resources are scarce, normally uniform dispersion is most common. And then when there's tons of resources, random distribution or dispersion is more common. So, for example, over here on the left, you can see uniform dispersion over here with this creosote bush. And that's most likely because this bush right here is probably taking up all the minerals and moisture that little area has, so nothing else can grow there. So they're spread out just evenly enough to where they can all just barely get enough nutrients or resources. Meanwhile, over here, there's probably a lot more moisture in the soil, more nutrients. It's greener, so it doesn't really matter. They can just kind of, dandelions can turn into little dandelion puffs and then, plant wherever they see fit because those resources are plentiful. So random dispersion is more likely. All right, age structure pyramids. I really like these actually. I think they're interesting, especially when you look at it. This is just kind of a estimate one. I don't know if this is actually from a specific country, but if you're ever just like, I really want to spend some time with some charts about age structure, just look up the age structure pyramid for different countries. It's very, very interesting to me. It might not be interesting to you. So again, we're still on those factors. What regulates the population's abundance and distribution? Population sex ratio. And population age structure. We've already said all the definitions in this unit start with population. I'm so sorry. I believe in your ability to navigate those waters, though. So population sex ratio, that makes sense, right? It's just the ratio of males to females in a population. And then population age structure also makes sense when you think about it. How many individuals fit into particular age categories? So normally these are broken down, and I hate that I can't show you what I'm trying to show you here. Let's just do this, and we'll be able to see it. You can see it's broken down by pre-reproductive age and reproductive age, and then post-reproductive age as they get older. So when you look at this, again, if you don't think it's super cool, that's okay. But you've got population in the millions down here at the bottom, right? And then the age up here at the top. So you've got pre-reproductive age, and it's divided by these longer gray lines. Pre-reproductive age, reproductive age, and then post-reproductive age. And so you can see that bigger parts of the population are younger. There are a lot more young people in this specific population than there are elderly people. There are very few elderly people in this specific population. And notice that this one is speaking specifically about less developed countries. So if you take the time and look at it, it's interesting to see what the age structure pyramids look like for more wealthy countries versus less developed countries. Interesting stuff to think on. So I believe that is where we're going to stop for right now, because I'm about to record the one for, what's today? I'm about to record the one for Wednesday as well on K and R selected species.